and onto other foods is too great. A study by North Carolina State University researchers aimed at gauging poultry washing habits and the effectiveness of education efforts to halt the practice drew 300 home cooks who said they usually rinse poultry before cooking. The researchers separated the group roughly in half. One group was sent information by email about the dangers of rinsing poultry. The other group did not receive an email. The cooks were asked to prepare a meal of chicken thighs and a salad. The cooks didn't know that the scientists inoculated the chicken with a harmless strain of E. coli bacteria, so that the researchers could later swab the kitchen surfaces to track cross-contamination. Among the chicken rinsers, 26% of those who received the email instructing them not to contaminated the salad, as did 30% of those who did not get an email. For those who didn't rinse their chicken, 31% of those who received the email contaminated the lettuce, as did 15% of those who didn't get the email. Most likely, the study said the cooks didn't wash their hands after touching the raw chicken or didn't sanitize the sink area well enough before handling the salad. Bottom line, stop worrying about washing poultry and instead worrying about washing your hands. This edition of Health in a Heartbeat is brought to you by University of Florida Health, committed to advancing excellence in patient care, research, and education, and by WUFT-FM. For more information or to subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, please visit our website, heartbeatradio.org.
On this week's On the Media, a breaking news consumer handbook for crime coverage. Lesson 1, beware the passive voice.
Officer-involved shooting, man died in police shooting. A few months ago, a police officer killed a young girl in a store in Los Angeles. The New York Times headline about it read, "Officer whose bullet killed 14-year-old girl."
On this week's On the Media from WNYC.
Join us for On the Media, Saturday mornings at 7 on KSJE Farmington. San Juan Regional Medical Center is your community hospital, committed to making life better for the communities we are privileged to serve. In fact, better is our mission, improving lives through personalized health and care. What matters most to our patients matters most to us, offering a comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and emergency care services so you can get the quality care you need right here at home. San Juan Regional Medical Center, celebrating life better here since 1910. 12 minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Wednesday morning, the 11th day, of May 2022, May 11th. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE. We are off the air this morning at 90.9 FM. We should be on the air shortly. They are putting in some new equipment for us today, and they are on schedule to wrap that up today, so we're thrilled about that. But we welcome our streaming listeners and viewers this morning because, of course, KSJE is always on KSJE.com, and the program is streaming out this morning to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. So welcome aboard, everyone. We're glad that you are with us this morning because coming up here in the next few moments, my guest this morning is the audiologist from San Juan Regional Medical Center. We'll talk about our hearing this morning with audiologist Luke Hinzmann. He is my guest. We'll be starting that conversation in the next few moments right here on KSJE. Then later on this hour, we'll be joined by Ron Price to learn another lesson about life in the sandbox. This morning, Ron is talking about perception. Join us for that coming up today at 8:50 on KSJE. Next hour, Mick Hess takes us roving with the arts. It is our weekday classical music program. This morning, Mick is featuring music from Schubert. You'll hear that at 9:06, a special 90-minute program which will take us to 10:30, and our local and regional author program right on Four Corners. Tracy Hales-Vass is speaking about publishing these days, so great insights about the publishing industry today on Right on Four Corners at 10:30 on KSJE. Don't forget, we invite you to connect with us on our Instagram page in addition to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And if you're a podcast person, you can subscribe for free to KSJE Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Places like iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio and Google Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, TuneIn, and much, much more. Check us out and subscribe and maybe discover a new program that you haven't yet heard on KSJE. Outside our studios this morning, it is a cloudy start to our Wednesday. We're expecting a partly sunny day today with a high today of 83, and those winds will pick up again. We're expecting some gusty winds again, some areas of blowing dust. Could see gusts up to 50 miles per hour this afternoon, so do be careful if you're driving around. 83 for a high, as I mentioned. 46 tonight with winds. Again tomorrow, sunny but cooler. The high 69 on Thursday. Cooling off to 36 Thursday night. Sunny and 77 on Friday, back up to the low 80s on Saturday, upper 80s for Sunday, Monday, and look at Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, near 90 degrees, with overnight lows back up again to the mid-50s. Outside our studios right now, it is currently 58 degrees. Well, let me introduce my guest who is here with me this morning. As I mentioned, the audiologist from San Juan Regional Medical Center. Luke Hinzmann is here this morning. Mr. Hinzmann, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Great to have you with us. And this is, as we were talking before we came on the air this morning, National Better Speech and Hearing Month during the month of May, correct?
That's correct.
Very good. Well, that gets you on the radio to talk a little bit about hearing with me and just this very important, obviously, sense that we sometimes neglect or maybe just forget about because it's kind of always with us until we sometimes all of a sudden realize that, wow, I'm not hearing things as well as I used to, or I'm missing some things. And so that's a lot of your world, isn't it?
It is. So I see people all the time, and I test their hearing, and what I hear much of the time is how it sneaks up on you, a hearing loss. That is. We tend to notice things gradually when it comes with ourselves, and this is very much the case where people don't necessarily notice things right away. And when we lose our hearing, it usually is slowly over time. And if it happens so slowly, it's easy not to notice it yourself, and certainly not to notice it right away when it happens, but years later.
Right. And so what are some of the things that folks could be looking for or listening for, if you will, that may indicate some type of hearing loss? Is it just harder maybe to distinguish voices in a crowd, or is that something that could come up?
The simple answer is not hearing like you used to, saying huh a lot more often. What a lot of people will say, or how I would describe it, is a lack of clarity. Right? I still hear people talking. I'm hearing them, but I'm not necessarily understanding them, or they don't sound as clear as they did. Things like that are pretty common, and most of the time I find that other people will notice it too. Family members, friends and family members will say, you're not hearing so well, and so my patients will come to me and say, well, my wife, my friends, my family members, they're saying I'm not hearing so well, and that is often true, where somebody else notices it maybe even sooner than the individual themselves.
Right. And is it maybe hard for the patient to come to that realization that maybe they aren't hearing as well? I imagine that may cause some friction in some relationships, right?
Yeah, to each their own, right? All sorts of people out there, but it's very common for people to not notice it themselves, and to maybe not admit it, and to not want to acknowledge that. It's easy to put things off, much easier to put things off, and that is the case a lot of the time.
Well, and it's maybe an admission that we're getting older, right? Because does happen over time. You mentioned that, right?
Yes. So there's a very strong correlation between hearing loss and age, right? Very strongly connected. The older we get, the more likely we have hearing problems. And certainly young people can have hearing problems, and older people can have normal hearing, but they're definitely connected. And so it goes together, and we find that as we get older, the hearing loss is likely to happen, and it's not always easy to admit that might be the case, or that we're in that category, maybe.
Sure, right. And that's just a normal part of aging, I guess, right? Is that all of our bodies kind of wear out over time.
Yep.
But I guess for some of us, our lifestyles may determine whether our hearing maybe gets worse sooner than later, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. So there's lots of things there's several things that can cause somebody to have a hearing problem. But age and noise are by far the two most common things. So if we're around lots of loud noise, we are much more likely to have a hearing problem. And that loud noise can come in different forms, from where we work to what we do recreationally. But noise is also very strongly connected to hearing problems and hearing loss.
And that's really damage, isn't it, to the hearing apparatus, right, in our ears?
Yep. So we're born with a certain amount of these sensory cells in our ear. When these sensory cells die, there's no getting them back. When they're gone, they're gone. And things like noise are well known to kill those sensory cells. For most people, that is a gradual thing too, right? You're working around noise in the oil field or something. That's not usually in 1 week we have noticeable damage. But years go by, sometimes decades, and that's when we often see. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If we are around heavy noise, firearms are probably number one on that list because they're so loud, or can be so loud. It doesn't take years and years in some of those cases. It can be isolated incidents as little as, or much shorter time frames for it to cause that damage.
Got it. Now, when we're on the job, though, that we have regulations and OSHA and things like that we should have hearing protection, right? And so you shouldn't have that much damage. So I would hope that hearing that earplugs or other things can help hold off some of that damage. Do they work pretty well?
They do work well if you use them.
I see, right.
There are regulations. There are also a lot of people that I see that will say, oh, they gave us earplugs and I didn't really use them, or something along those lines. Well, at the end of the day, it boils down to you having to wear those earplugs or earmuffs or whatever's provided. And if it's not provided, I still recommend get them yourself. They're inexpensive overall, and they are definitely worth it. But yes, there's regulations, but
sure,
not everyone's
yes.
Wearing them all the time, and there's no regulations if it's recreational.
That's right.
I mean, nobody's making you wear these earplugs if you're doing stuff that has nothing to do with the occupation.
Right. But they are effective, is what you're saying, to help protect our hearing and keep it as good as it can be as we grow older.
That's the best thing you can do when you're around loud noise. If you have to be around loud noise, protect your ears. If you don't have to be around the loud noise, that's obviously pretty effective too. But if you're around it, earplugs, earmuffs, when properly used, make a huge difference. And I recommend everyone out there to do that, because that's the one thing that we can control out of the several things that tend to cause hearing loss. Age, some genetics, certain medications that can cause it. Those we can't really do much about, right? The one thing we can control is, did you wear your earplugs when you were around that heavy noise? Did you wear them consistently? And if the answer to that is yes, then hey, you at least did your part.
Right. Got it. My guest this morning, Luke Hinzmann, is here. He is a lead audiologist at San Juan Regional Medical Center. We are talking about ways to protect our hearing and maybe signs that our hearing is maybe not as good as it used to be over time. And so I wanted to ask you a bit about, you mentioned recreational, obviously, hearing, shooting being one. Sometimes we think about maybe loud music or concerts or things along that line that can be loud, but maybe for a shorter period. If I go to a concert a few times a year, is that causing damage to my hearing?
It certainly can be. I mean, the answer is, how loud is that
Sure.
noise? But one probably fairly decent sign is if you leave that event and your ears feel like they're ringing, or things sound muffled, even if it's temporary. That's usually a good sign that some level of permanent damage just happened.
Got it.
And so, yes, even the occasional concert can cause damage.
Gotcha. Interesting. And so the treatments, I guess, you've got a lot of options, right, for folks who come, or some options for folks who come to you, right, and say, my spouse, my friends are telling me I'm saying what all the time, or or what'd you say? And so I guess I should get tested, and maybe you can tell me just how bad my hearing is. There are standards, I guess, that you can test against and tell a person where they're at? So
the biggest thing is to just actually get a hearing test. I mean, there's a lot of time from when a person first suspects, or a family member suspects they have a hearing problem, to when they actually get a hearing test. I mean, studies show different things, but we're talking 6-7 years usually from when they think there might be a hearing problem to when they actually get a hearing test. So I would encourage anyone in that feels they might be in that category to just get a hearing test and go from there. I see people who think they have a hearing problem, or things aren't sure. We test them and their hearing's normal. They have great news, and they usually leave smiling. And I see people on the other end of the spectrum as well. But get a hearing test is my main advice. If we do that hearing test and we find out there is hearing loss, There's a couple different ways that can go, but the main way that could go is hearing aids. Hearing aids have come a long ways. I say to other people, hearing aids are computers, and computers have come a long ways, just like a cell phone. What did a cell phone do 10 years ago? Something different than it does now.
Sure.
And same would be true with hearing aids. How it looks, how it performs, that's always changing.
Got you. And I guess that is maybe part of the stigma, if you will, against hearing problems, right? Is that then I'm going to have to wear this device, even though modern hearing aids are pretty invisible, are they? I mean, they really fit inside the ear. Yep. They're almost non-visible. Yep.
There's always a stigma with them, and that's unfortunate, but that's the reality. They have come a long ways as far as what they sound like and what they look like. Now, I still make hearing aids that, they still make hearing aids. I still work with hearing aids that might be bigger and things like that, but they definitely make smaller ones. They make ones that are more cosmetically appealing, and all sorts of things like that, because these companies, they put a lot of energy and research into what people want, and that's high on the list, is what is it going to look like. And so they do their best to make these hearing aids look as good as they can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned cell phones, which I think is a great analogy, because just like cell phones have gotten better technologically and smaller, and I guess same would go for hearing aids. As the technology gets better, right, they're able to cram more stuff into a smaller footprint, that can fit into your ear and be really almost invisible, and still provide better hearing aid and assistance than the earlier versions.
Yeah. So as they are able to build these differently and time marches on and more effectively, they can make them smaller. There's always limitations, but they're definitely able to make them look better and make them smaller and sound better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very interesting. The other, I guess, option that maybe folks hear about, which I know maybe you don't do a lot of here, but the implants, right? But that's another major advancement in hearing, is it not?
It is. So cochlear implants are usually for the extreme cases, severe, profound hearing loss, in which hearing aids didn't quite, work as well as they could, and those cochlear implants are just like hearing aids in the regard that it's technology and it's a computer. And so as stuff advances, the cochlear implants advance too. And those have come a long ways as well.
Got you. That's another option for folks. But when you give someone a hearing aid or fit them and turn it on for the first time, I imagine if it is pretty severe, the reaction is pretty amazing for the patient, is it not?
Yeah. So if they have a significant hearing loss and they're wearing hearing aids for the first time, often it's like a light switch. I mean, their world just opened up. I'm hoping to get a lot of patients before that's the case. I would love to see people get hearing aids before they're in the significant or severe hearing loss, because there's a lot of help that they can get even in mild and moderate hearing losses. But absolutely, it can be like I said, like a light switch.
Sure.
Wow. Just their whole world opened up pretty darn quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess what would determine that is that hearing test, right? Of the
Correct.
level of hearing loss.
Yep. The hearing test determines pretty much all of that. That's got to be the starting point for everything.
Right. Let me switch gears a little bit and ask you about kids, because that's another area that you work with, and certainly with infants and babies. We talk about development, and hearing is directly related to speech and that type of development as well. And so that's a really important thing for parents to know, right? To see how their kids are reacting to sounds around them, and if there may be something wrong, this would be the time to find out, obviously.
So Better Speech and Hearing Month.
Yes.
And we have learned pretty clearly that if we have a hearing problem at birth, we're going to have a speech and language problem as well. And so those are very strongly connected. And what somebody might be looking for, and I'd advise anyone out there to just talk with the pediatrician, right? They have a very good idea of what's going on too, but to look for, how is language developing? Are they talking? And they're milestones, and there's definitely gray area in that regard. But if we are seeing that this kid isn't talking at all as we're getting older, that's probably a big sign to, hey, there could be a potential hearing problem.
Sure. Is there anything before that, though? I mean, even if a child's not reacting to the noises in the room, would that be something to be concerned about? Or is that too simple?
That's tough,
Okay.
right? How we react to it as, especially if a newborn, right? A 1, 2, 3 month old baby. There's a lot of gray area in that regard. So, but yeah, that is a sign too. I mean, a lot of parents will say, oh, they respond to my voice. That's probably a big one too.
Sure.
How they respond is their own perception. But, yeah, responding to sounds and spoken words specifically around them is also a clue.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. But are there these hearing tests that you can give to children, or how young can you go?
Yeah. When they're born. I
Really?
mean, yeah, hospitals are, San Juan Regional, we test every baby that's born before they even leave the hospital. So a newborn hearing screening. So there's no limit.
Gotcha.
No limit.
And that, right. And that can probably then show potential issues or not.
Correct.
And then that can get that child, that very young infant, whatever they need.
Yep.
Moving
And
forward.
luckily that's not too common.
Sure.
That these babies are born with hearing loss. It does happen. But yeah, these tests even done that age can help us figure out what's going on and where to go from there.
Right. Well, and as you mentioned, hearing is so directly related to speech development. And so if you catch it early, then you kind of avoid these other issues from developing further on as the child grows.
Yep.
And so that's an important thing to think about. And the schools are really good partners, are they not? In
Correct.
In testing these children and letting parents know what's going on.
Yeah. So lots of schools, and I don't work in the schools, but lots of schools will do hearing screenings. And what's pretty common for years in Farmington municipal schools was every kindergartner got a little hearing screen, regardless of suspected a problem or not, just screen everyone.
Sure.
And that was really helpful to diagnose even some issues or some kids who were missed in some capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that could be helpful as well. We were talking before we came on the air this morning, too, that, again, when there is a hearing loss or damage, it's kind of irreversible, right? There's no pill, there's no procedure, no surgery that can really restore someone's hearing if the cells that you mentioned are damaged. They just don't come back.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Right.
But no, that's not the case. The case is when we lose our hearing, for the most part, it's permanent. Now, there's some medical exceptions to that, but for the vast majority of people with a hearing problem, when we lose that hearing, it is irreversible. There is no going back. The damage is done, and it's going to be that way for the rest of their life, likely to get worse.
Got it. And how much would you say, if you can even guesstimate, how much hearing loss goes undiagnosed?
Oh, that's a great question. So the numbers change, and it's hard to really know those numbers. I would say that there's probably somewhere between 30 and 40 million Americans with some degree of hearing loss. And the last I read, roughly only a third of them have hearing aids. So 30 to 35% actually have hearing aids. Now, of that remaining, 65, 70%, some of them probably know they have a hearing problem and just aren't wearing hearing aids. But I bet there's a lot, probably millions in our country, that are unaware that they have a hearing problem.
Wow. Which is significant to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd say it's significant, yeah.
And job security for you.
Yeah.
I think as
Yeah.
well. But I guess to wrap things up, we just have a couple minutes remaining this morning. What would your advice be? I guess as folks, go about their daily lives, we're getting out and about more, we're talking with people, we're interacting more with people. Maybe when we were home alone, working from home, we didn't notice it as much. But now that we're back in restaurants and crowds, maybe that's harder for us to distinguish those voices. Like you said, we still hear, but maybe we can't just hear clearly. And is that maybe something to
I've
watch
heard that
for?
a number of times. That, well, when the lockdowns were happening, it was not really a problem. I was at home. Masks have created a problem, and we're not always wearing masks now, but wearing masks made it a lot harder. I've heard a number of people say things like, I didn't notice how much I relied on lip reading until I wasn't able to read their lips.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge thing for a lot of my patients and a lot of people out there. My general advice would be two things. Protect your hearing. Whenever you're around loud noise and you need to raise your voice to talk to someone, especially if they're right next to you, that's a pretty good indication that you should probably be protecting your hearing. The noise in that situation is probably causing permanent, irreversible damage. Option or advice number two, I guess, would be just talk to your primary care doctor. Tell them what's going on, what you're thinking, and if you want a hearing test, they can very easily send referrals and set you up with somebody like myself, possibly, to test your hearing and go from there.
Gotcha. Can folks contact you directly, or does it usually come from a referral from their primary care?
They're welcome to contact us directly, but we do need a referral from a primary care physician in order for us to see them and for the vast majority for insurance to pay for the hearing tests.
Gotcha. Very good. But the things we've talked about kind of give folks an idea of what to be looking for, listening for, or not, and to know if they need to come see you or talk to their doctor about going to see you or someone like yourself.
Yeah, and it can be tough to know if you really have, but most people, I think, in their heart realize, okay, I'm not quite hearing like I used to. I'm sure there's some denial there for all of us in many things, but if you think you're not hearing like you used to, if you're hearing other people saying, you're not hearing me, very well anymore, that is a very clear sign. Hey, go talk to your primary care and see, what you think and see what they think and get a hearing test. It's pretty simple and painless. I do them all the time, and that's probably the best starting point.
Sure. And doesn't take very long, does it?
No.
It's pretty quick.
It's pretty quick. Yeah.
So there you go. Other advice, too, if you've got maybe a parent, an elderly parent maybe, and you're noticing maybe some decline or things along that line, it's always very diplomatic to try to approach these subjects with an elderly loved one. But how to bring it up? What would you say?
Well, how you bring it up is ultimately up to you. I would probably just mention it. You seem like you're not hearing me very well anymore, or it seems worse. Do you notice that problem? Something along that lines where they answer and they have maybe some buy into it seems to be more effective, but I'm not sure I have a great answer of how you get other people to do something. But mentioning it, I mean, if you don't mention it, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So,
but you go for a visit and the TV's really loud or the radio's really loud.
I've heard that many times over the years.
That'd be a sign?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's time to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Once you turn the TV down. So that'll do it. Luke Hinzmann, thank you for coming in this morning. Audiologist at San Juan Regional Medical Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Nice to visit with you. My guest this morning here on KSJE. KSJE is supported by the Farmington Civic Center, bringing a full slate of entertainment to Farmington and San Juan County. The interactive art of Artrageous. Saturday, May 21st at 7:30 p.m. The Farmington Civic Center, 200 West Arrington in downtown Farmington. Find out more online at fmtn.org/shows or 505-599-1148. KSJE is proud to support Riverfest, Memorial Day weekend, May 27th, 28th, and 29th on the banks of the Animas River in Farmington. Enjoy all-day music, food, beer gardens, vendors, crafts and raft rides, the recycled art show, and the plein air painters. Riverfest, a jolt-worthy event, proudly hosted by the River Reach Foundation, sponsored in part by the City of Farmington and the Farmington Convention and Visitors Bureau. Find out more at riverfestnewmexico.com. KSJE and San Juan College present the Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week. Week 16, finals, finals, finals. Don't let the finals week become a nightmare of stress and anxiety. Get prepared and conquer your finals with these final steps. Start early. Create a study schedule and stick to it. Prioritize your study time. Some exams may be harder than others. Attend the review session. Ask questions about the exam and study for the style of exam. Create a study guide and make flashcards. Take breaks and stay well rested. Quiz yourself, or better, have someone else quiz you. Show up early for the test. Visit the Tutoring Center for additional support. The Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week, presented by KSJE and the Student Achievement Center at San Juan College.
One state's